The day Clara gave birth to Ethan, Clara was overwhelmed with joy. After 10 long years of trying, she finally held her son Ethan in her arms. God had heard her prayers, and she could not believe that her dream had come true. Her mother-in-law, Anne, would no longer have the ammunition to criticize her and belittle her. To Clara, Ethan was everything. He was her firstborn, the miracle that silenced her critics. She vowed to protect and cherish him always, doing everything in her power to ensure his happiness. The day Clara returned from the hospital with Ethan, she gathered all the household staff and gave them a stern warning. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice firm. "I'm serious about this. Be careful with Ethan. Don't scold him. Don't touch his things. He's my son, and I will raise him the way I see fit." Clara did not hesitate to fire anyone who mismanaged Ethan's belongings. That's how much she adored him. As Ethan grew older, he became incredibly attached to Clara. She was always there for him, while his father, Richard, worked tirelessly to provide for the family. By the time Ethan turned 3, Clara began noticing his unusual dependence. He didn't play with other children. Instead, he followed Clara around, constantly talking and seeking her attention. If Clara ever laughed with Richard, Ethan would stomp his feet and cry, "Mum, come back." Richard tried to correct him, but Clara would intervene. "He's just a child, let him be," Clara would say. "Stop scolding him." "You can't keep coddling him forever," Richard would argue. "He needs to learn to be independent." But Clara refused to listen. "He's just expressing how much he loves me. Don't be jealous." Richard would warn, "A child who stays too long under their mother's wings will forget how to fly." But Clara ignored him, continuing to dote on Ethan in ways that confused even Richard. She did strange things to make him happy, even at his expense. "All I want is for Ethan to be happy," she would say. While most mothers encourage their children to grow and become independent, Clara kept Ethan close, shielding him from the world. One afternoon, Clara finished her bath and walked into Ethan's room, where he was playing with his tablet. She wasn't dressed, but she didn't think anything of it. To her, Ethan was still innocent. "How's my boy today?" she asked, smiling. Ethan put down his tablet and began playing with her orange. "Mum, what are these?" he asked. Clara smiled and nodded. "Do you like them?" She didn't scold him. Instead, she let him play with them freely. One evening, Clara was on the bed with Ethan when their maid entered to take Ethan for his bath. Ethan suddenly began crying. "Mum, don't let her hurt me. She always pinches me." Without even confirming the story, Clara fired the maid on the spot. "Madam, I didn't do anything," the maid pleaded. "How dare you lie about my son? You're fired. I won't see you here again tomorrow," Clara shouted. That night, she took over the responsibility of bathing Ethan every day. As the months passed, their bond grew deeper. It was no longer just a mother-son relationship, it was something more. They spent every moment together, and even when Richard traveled for work, Clara and Ethan would sleep in the same bed. One day, while Clara was showering, Ethan asked to bathe with her. Clara thought nothing of it and allowed him in. From then on, it became their daily routine. They showered and dressed together. They lived as if there were no boundaries, and Clara didn't see the danger in it. As Ethan grew older, his behavior became increasingly strange. He wouldn't touch Clara's orange and make comments about her body, asking odd questions, but Clara dismissed it, thinking it was just curiosity. One day, Clara's mother, Margaret, visited and immediately noticed the unusual relationship. "What's going on here, Clara? You shower with your son? Do you understand the danger you're in?" she asked, alarmed. "He's just a child. He doesn't understand," Clara replied. Margaret shook her head. "Clara, this is wrong. You are spoiling him. You need to stop before it's too late." "You're just being dramatic," Clara would respond, ignoring her mother's warnings. But things took a darker turn when Ethan turned 15. The boy who used to be shy and clingy had now become bold, aggressive, and controlling, especially when it came to Clara. Teachers at his school complained about his behavior towards male staff members, and at home, he refused to spend time with anyone except Clara. One afternoon, the neighbor, Mr. Adams, casually greeted Clara, saying, "You're looking as beautiful as ever, Clara." Ethan, who had been standing nearby, froze. His expression darkened, and before anyone could react, he stormed over to Mr. Adams, pushing him against the wall. "Don't talk to her like that," Ethan shouted. Richard rushed over, pulling Ethan away. "What is wrong with you?" Richard yelled, but Ethan said nothing, his fists clenched in anger. That evening, Richard confronted Clara. "Clara, can't you see? Ethan's behavior isn't normal. He's acting like a man fighting for his wife." "That's ridiculous," Clara responded. "He's just protective of me." "You're wrong," Richard insisted. "This has gone too far. He needs discipline." But Clara refused to listen. She continued to praise Ethan for his affection, even when he began calling her Queen and bringing her flowers. Richard felt helpless, watching as Clara continued to enable Ethan's disturbing behavior. One evening, as Clara was sorting laundry, Ethan entered holding a notebook close to his chest. His actions were suspicious, as if he were hiding something. When Clara asked what it was, Ethan dismissed it as just school stuff, but her curiosity got the better of her. Later that night, she opened the notebook, and her heart sank as she read the disturbing words, "My queen. No one can take her from me. I will make my father proud, but she will always be mine." Clara was horrified. She quickly shut the notebook, telling herself it was just a phase. But the fear in her heart began to grow. The following night, Clara found herself face to face with Ethan. "Mum," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Clara's heart raced. "What is it?" "I love you, Mum," Ethan said softly. "I love you like no other. I don't need anyone else." Clara froze, her blood running cold. "You're my son. Of course you love me." "No, it's more than that," Ethan insisted. "You're the only one for me. I don't need anyone else." Clara tried to back away, but Ethan grabbed her arm. "We belong together," he said, his voice low and intense. In that moment, Clara realized the horrifying truth. She had crossed a line, and now her son was lost to her. She ran to call Richard, her voice trembling. "It's Ethan. Something's terribly wrong." Richard arrived home only to find Ethan shouting, "She's mine. No one can take her from me." With a struggle, Richard managed to subdue Ethan, but Clara stood frozen, her eyes full of guilt and regret. She had nurtured something dark, and now she couldn't undo it. The next day, Richard confronted Clara. "This is your fault. You allowed this to happen. I warned you." Clara sat silently, filled with shame. Deep down, she knew she had made a terrible mistake, but she couldn't undo the damage. Desperate for help, Clara called her mother. Margaret arrived and suggested taking Ethan to a pastor for deliverance. Although Richard disagreed, Clara insisted. When Pastor Samuel saw Ethan, he immediately prophesied, "This boy is cursed. He needs deliverance." He demanded a large sum of money for the ritual, and Clara transferred the funds without hesitation. But the ceremony only made things worse. Ethan became more violent, eventually tearing Pastor Samuel's robe and attacking security guards. Clara and Margaret tried other pastors, but nothing worked. Ethan's behavior escalated, and he moved his belongings into Clara's room, refusing to leave. One night, things reached a boiling point. Ethan attempted to assault Clara. Terrified, Clara ran out of the house just as Richard arrived home. He immediately called the police, and Ethan was taken into custody. Thank you for watching. This story reminds us of the importance of setting boundaries and recognizing red flags before it's too late. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Clara's situation? Don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening stories. Until next time, take care and stay mindful.